Hello and welcome to TV Dinners. My name's Luke Gittos and I'm delighted to be presenting this edition where we're looking at attempts to change our behaviour on everything from drink to smoking. The government are very keen to regulate our drinking habits and interfere in that area of our lives. So why don't we take a quick look at a couple of anti-drinking campaigns.
1 in 5 children suffer because their mum or dad drinks too much. 8 out of 10 acts of violence in public places are alcohol-related, and more than 320,000 are addicted to alcohol.
I've had enough. Haven't we all had enough? Get to know how, to know when. A drink a word.
So, does anyone think that we drink too much and that the government is best placed to step in and control our habits?
Like, why should I be taxed as if I was an alcoholic just because I want to wine it with dinner?
I've never drank, but so that's maybe taints my perception a bit. But the point is not how much we drink or if we drink too much, because obviously everybody's entitled to drink as much as they want. It's perhaps our behaviour when we do drink. As a nation, we're perceived as people who act irresponsibly and perhaps overstep the boundaries when we drink. And it's undeniable that if you look at any A&E room, their busiest nights are Friday night, Saturday night, when people go out drinking. Drinking is not an excuse to lose your responsibilities and your duties as a citizen.
99.9% of us, 99% of the time, have a good relationship with drink in the sense that we go out and we have a good time, or we stay in and have a good time, and it's all fine. Once in a while, everybody does it. They drink more than they thought they had, or they react differently, or they just having a good time and they go too far. But we should be morally responsible for those things. I don't think anybody recognises the defence of, well, I was drunk, so it was okay for me to hit that other person. But actually, most of the time, alcohol is a very, very useful social lubricant, and we get used to how we're going to react to it, and it's for the most part a very, very positive thing. That's why every society practically has used alcohol, and it's been enjoyed around the world.
It's funny you call it a social lubricant. In terms of it does get us talking, it gets us together, it gets us socialising, it gets us into bars talking to each other. It's a great thing. I've just finished university, and I know that there is a section of people who binge drink, but I'll tell you what, that's in your first year of university. Yes, you binge drink. You enjoy it, you have fun. But by your second year, you'll have gone down. By your third year, you'll probably be drinking once a month. And after that, you just drink responsibly like an adult. You don't drink. It isn't like a problem that's endemic with the whole of our society. It's just a phase that passes. And I don't think that the whole of society should be punished for the acts of young people who've just been introduced to alcohol.
But do you think it's problematic if people like binge drinking and enjoy, doing things on a Friday, Saturday night, taking it too far? Is that a problem? And should we be thinking about trying to change those people?
I think when we do it in Britain, it's not that it's okay, but when you go abroad, we do sort of have a reputation abroad that the Brits drink too much. I think maybe that might be an issue as well, or something problematic, that we almost bring our cultural bad aspects of it when we go abroad as well. And I think we have a responsibility there. I think really it does come down to responsibility at the end of the day.
Well, obviously those places as well do encourage it. I mean, you go to Falaraki, it's not like they're closing the doors at 11 and it's like, would you like a Diet Coke with that, sir? It's there's a lot of encouragement for that kind of thing, and people trade off the fact that they get the tourism versus the alcohol. I mean, and I think the idea that people letting their hair down in that way, for the most part, that they get drunk and there's no further consequence to that at all. So, and the great thing about alcohol as well is, if you have overdone it, the next morning you feel like really, really rough, and it discourages you from doing it. You don't need the government to discourage you when you're having a hangover.
It's already punishment.
Yeah.
I come from an African family, and in the African culture, women don't actually drink that much or at all. I'm able to affirm their drinking, so I don't understand how here in this country, every time you're going to the club you have to drink. If you want to put yourself in danger, or if you want to be perceived in a certain way, it's up to you. But
There's a problem with the way you describe this, like typical Western young girl in a short dress drinking, as if she's responsible. I mean, whenever rape is portrayed in the media, they highlight the fact that she was drunk, they highlight the fact that she was wearing a short dress. Women now, in this modern age, we have the right to do that. It's freedom. This is our basic freedom, that if I want to drink, it definitely shouldn't have anything to do with perception. The arguments, I think, that make sense in terms of alcohol are health related, possibly, and you know, like the fact that it is causing a burden on other people, that when we start impinging on other people's right, that when we start throwing up on other people, okay, then stop drinking.
But I think as somebody who spent a lot of time around drunk people without being drunk myself, a point that you said earlier, Luke, which was about how, you know, nobody accepts the view that you know, that I was drunk so I hit that guy. I would disagree with that strongly. I hear that all the time. I only slept with her because I was drunk. I only did this because I was drunk. I only did that. I only ended up in A&E because I was drunk. I only ended up in the back of a police car because I was drunk. I think drink, it can bring out certain aspects of a person's personality which they wouldn't have the wherewithal to bring out if they were sober. And in that regard, I don't know if drink gets a bad rap for perhaps being blamed for this, when really there are wider social issues or deeper social issues that are going on. So if somebody is violent to his wife and his children and he's an alcoholic, normally they would say, oh, it's his alcoholism that's driving him to that, when in reality he may just have some sort of mental issues. Or, you know.
Well, I think I agree with you, and I think that it's symptomatic of the way that alcohol is discussed, that it gets tied up with a whole host of other issues. So you saw in the clip that it gets tied up with people being violent, disruptive and antisocial. And none of those things are things we, you know, want in society. You know, you do want to. People throwing up on other people is not a good thing. But I think I agree with you that what Rob's point, I think, was that people need to, at the same time as being free to do what they please and consume alcohol in any way they choose, we also need to have a sense of responsibility about our actions and know that if we get into a certain state when we drink like that we should have a degree of responsibility and curtail our behaviour. But isn't the difference between us doing that and the state actively encouraging us to do the same thing, Rob?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a great quote from a Labour minister, Hazel Blears, when she said, "I'm really shocked to find that people go out and just to get drunk." It's just like, and the kind of like otherworldliness of like the you know, politicians about these things is a bit bizarre, really. Middle class people drinking, you know, fine wine is generally regarded as okay, whereas, you know, people going out and being a bit leery on a Friday night and, you know, wearing inappropriate skirts and that kind of thing is regarded as not acceptable. As it happens, actually, I think they've kind of got politically correct about the whole thing now. So rather than just demonising women for, you know, going out and getting drunk or whatever, now they just demonise everybody about it. And actually, they are starting to demonise the middle class drinkers as well, because the figures are there. You know, actually, it's people sitting at home, you know, drinking a bottle of whiskey, quite a nice bottle of whiskey, or drinking a couple of bottles of wine every night. They're the ones that are actually seeing the real health problems. Whereas, as somebody said earlier, young people tend to sort of calm down, especially once they have to start working for a living. And that's just called growing up.
I was just wondering how we measure being responsible, because we kept coming back to the point that, oh, as long as you drink and be responsible, that's fine. But surely once you've drank a certain amount, the responsibility goes out the window. So who is there to pick up the pieces?
I think there's a distinction between actions which the state can legitimately intervene in when drunken behaviour becomes criminal behaviour. So that's the dividing line. But what the state seems to be doing at the moment is trying to attempt to control the consumption of alcohol in order to preempt what they see to be, you know, disruptive and antisocial behaviour which lead from that. And of course, the majority of us don't turn violent or become antisocial when we go out drinking. The majority of us do not throw up in the back of a taxi. But what these campaigns seem to attempt to do is encourage the idea that we are all behaving like that when we go out and drink. And I think there's a real problem with misrepresentation.
It is scaremongering in a sense like that, yeah. It is, it's a bit extreme.
So they're moving on from alcohol to smoking. Let's have a look at a couple of anti-smoking ads.
When you smoke, the chemicals you inhale cause mutations in your body. And mutations are how cancer starts. Every 15 cigarettes you smoke will cause a mutation. If you could see the damage.
Over 80% of cigarette smoke is invisible, so no matter how careful you are, they still breathe in the harmful poisons.
Well, none of us can smoke at the table, so it's the one prohibited activity that we can't do today. Smoking is really bad for you, and it will kill you, I mean, eventually. So the argument presumably has to change slightly. What's your approach, Rob?
I actually like the smoking argument the best, because there's no kind of shilly-shallying about, you know, oh, well, it might be bad for you, it might not be bad for you, or you can do it in moderation. Nobody thinks that even having one cigarette is, like, good for you. Everybody knows that there is a sliding scale. The more you do it, the worse it is for you, and there's clear links between smoking and ill health. And actually, because of that, it makes the argument about having the freedom to choose to do that much clearer, because we all know, and nobody who smokes could possibly be under any illusion about the ill health, but we choose to do it because we enjoy doing it, and it's our choice. The government shouldn't interfere with that choice. Now, it's one thing to say, oh well, you know, we should you know, not do it in certain circumstances, but even then, people can negotiate those things for themselves. I've never worked in an office in the last 20 years where people smoked at their desks. People realise between their workmates that they don't want to do that. But on the other hand, in a bar, the landlord should be able to decide what happens in his pub or her pub and decide whether smoking is allowed or not. And those choices should be up to us, and we should be allowed to make the wrong choices, the bad choices, the unhealthy choices, if we want to. It's fine to give us advice about those things, but then that should be left to us.
I mean, I personally don't smoke, but I also know that people who smoke, well, they think they have a choice, but do they really? It is an addiction. So, like, the help that the NHS or the public opinion is trying to give to them to actually quitting, I think that's very positive, because, you know, in a family that would affect other people, like children. Well, my mom smokes still, and, you know, she thinks that she's entitled to, and I agree, I mean, of course, but I never liked that. So, well, what we saw in the ad, that actually, you know, kids don't really have, they're not in the position of arguing with their parents, because they just, you know, they're passive. And I do think that's government task to address those issues.
It seems that if we're taking a principled approach to this, that what Rob talks about, we should have the freedom to decide for ourselves what we do to our bodies, even if that thing that we are doing to our bodies is a very bad thing.
Even though I'm in agreement with, you know, I'm along Rob's lines with the other topics, but when it comes to, you know, smoking, because I personally don't smoke, but I feel that since a few things have, you know, like, for example, not smoking in bars have come into play, I do feel like my life's a bit easier. Although I understand that, you know, like, on a personal level, you know, like, just because it makes me happy, you know, it's a bit unfair to say that. But what about the fact that smoking really does, like, directly impact someone next to you who really doesn't appreciate it? You know what I mean? What about that argument?
I think that's a perfectly valid point. I think your freedom only goes as far as it starts to affect other people's freedom, and then it stops becoming your freedom and actually a restriction that you have to put on yourself. As somebody who smokes occasionally, I think the smoking ban is a positive thing, because it helps me to regulate when I smoke.
I also think that the difference with the freedom argument is the fact that smoking is highly addictive in a way that junk food and alcohol haven't concretely been proven to be. And so I know kids who started smoking as early as year 8, so that's when they're 12, 13 years old. How much freedom do they really have then? I mean, there is an amount of peer pressure, there is an amount of, you know, kids think it's cool to smoke, and they make these decisions uninformed, and then they have to carry on doing it. It's not completely free.
But people do start smoking when they're kids and then give up. I mean, that's probably the most fundamental undermining of what you're saying. I mean, I know a lot of young people who started smoking when they were 12, 13, 14, and then get to the age of 18, 19 and realise, well, I don't really want to carry this on, and make real efforts to give up. I think that's within all, you know, any smoker can give up. So I think it certainly is a question of freedom. When we talk about smoking nowadays, the idea that smokers are slaves to cigarettes is put around quite a lot, and that's seen as the dividing line between this and food and drink, as you're suggesting. But for me, although it's more difficult to give up cigarettes because there is that physically addictive element to it, we shouldn't then deny, should we, that smokers are making a conscious decision to carry on smoking.
Absolutely, I think. But I think what's lost in all of this is that, like you say, there seems to be this idea with smoking that once you start smoking, you're a smoker. Whereas if you drink, you're not necessarily a drinker. You're just an adult who chooses to drink when they have some free time or they want to relax. I don't see why smoking can't be placed in those same terms. And I don't understand why the government would be so sort of black and white on smoking in that, you know, for example, in the advert where one cigarette will give you a tumour, whereas one glass of wine won't necessarily make you an alcoholic. So there's a definite double standard and definitely a demonisation of smokers, which seems to be okay, whereas a demonisation of any other group of people within our society is something that we've tried to work against and we fought world wars against, and it's really disheartening to see that's propagated by government.
But do you think, when it comes to demonisation of smokers, do you think that on a personal level, on a social level, people actually feel that? Because I don't think that, for example, all my friends that smoke, or, you know, I don't really think that they necessarily feel demonised in any way, apart from the fact that you have to go outside. Fair enough, like, I give them that.
As you say, the starting point is they're forced to go outside, so that immediately this is the term that they use in the anti-tobacco industries. They're denormalised, and that's what they want to do. They want to denormalise smoking and smokers. And there's lots of other ways in which that happens as well. So, for example, you know, there's talk of people being refused jobs because of smoking, or told that they're not only not allowed to smoke at work, but also not allowed to smoke at any other time or be seen to be smoking. We've seen the various National Health Service trusts refusing smokers' operations until they give up, and so on and so forth. So there's lots of different ways in which they're doing it. I mean, and for example, you know, those adverts now, they're saying, you know, you're killing your children, you know, which is completely exaggerated. The idea that, you know, people, you know, having a cigarette in a car is killing them. You know, most of us, or at least certainly my generation, grew up around people who smoked, and we're fine. We haven't been killed by this process one little bit. So I think there's a lot of exaggeration, and there's an awful lot of there is real demonisation of it, and it's, in fact, it's testament to the fact that we're so used to it that we don't really notice it anymore. And I think that's probably the most worrying thing of all.
But I think the state's involvement in it has been a good thing. Even for smokers, it can probably encourage them to give up. I mean, the countless TV commercials at the NHS to help you quit smoking, help you assist in this. I think it's probably a good thing in the end for smokers, because it's clear that the health benefits are negative.
I mean, I found that the NHS, on my recent visits to the doctors, have an incredibly dysfunctional relationship with smoking. Because the first thing they ask you is, have you ever smoked? And if you answer yes, you're then in their eyes a smoker for your whole medical history. So you're a smoker, and then you're an ex-smoker, but if you can't become a non-smoker unless you've never smoked in your whole life. So you're always considered to be vulnerable to starting up again. And it seems that idea is a very clear indication of the government's view of smokers. People who have once got involved in smoking can never then be completely free of their ties to cigarettes. And I just think this is a really problematic undermining of people's authority to choose for themselves whether they smoke at one point in their life, whether they don't smoke. I think the arguments that you're putting forward are an extension of that idea that once you smoke, you need to be encouraged to stop smoking, but then, even worse than that, to constantly monitor whether you've started again. It seems to me to be the most bizarre extension of what the NHS was set up to do.
I mean, I think Luke raises a really interesting point there, because about the way in which the government campaigns kind of screw things up a lot. So he talks about the smoking, but for me, whenever I go to the doctor, they go, have you thought about your weight? You know, actually, that becomes like, it gets in the way of actually treating the patient in front of you. That you now have to look at them in terms of a set of targets. Are they too fat? What's their blood pressure like? Do they smoke? Do they take enough exercise? Rather than actually treating whatever condition, which was probably, almost certainly, completely unrelated to any of those things.
Well, that's all we've got time for on this edition of TV Dinners. I'd like to thank our intrepid volunteers for being with us, and our special guest, Rob Lyons. Please do join in the discussion in the comments section, and if you'd like to join us at the dinner table, please do get in contact via email. And cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers. Yeah, sugary, unhealthy nonsense. That's what you want to avoid it, mate.
They'll be the ones that have these.
Yeah, exactly.